Hey there, this is Paul talking about our favorite Course in Miracles and talking about the atonement. What is atonement? If you need some forgiveness, you need some atonement because the atonement is the same thing as forgiveness. Forgiveness, atonement, true perception, salvation, all are one. They're all the same thing. So atonement is this state in which the truth is recognized. So what is the truth? You think that you separated from God, and you think that you sinned, and you think and believe that you actually can do that, and you believe that you've done it, and it's had real effects and consequences, and caused something to happen, and that now you are in a state following that where because it's happened, you now have to suffer and be in a body in a world and be sick and dead and unhappy, having tons of guilt because of what you did, damn it. However, here's a fact. Nothing real can be threatened. God cannot be sinned against. He cannot be affected. Nothing can happen to him. He is totally causal, meaning that he cannot be at the effect of anything. Nothing can change him. Nothing can go against his will. Nothing can change his mind. So it is literally impossible to affect God in any way. It's impossible to sin against God. It's impossible to cause him in any way at all. So because it's literally impossible, you literally have not done so. You have not attacked God. You have not caused God. You have not hurt God. You haven't done anything whatsoever to upset God. You haven't so much as scratched him. You haven't done anything whatsoever to change him in even the slightest way. God is permanent, permanently real, permanently safe, permanently immortal, and you cannot change that. It is a fact. It is absolute reality. So what that means is you think that this separation thing has occurred, but the fact is, the truth is, it can't. It literally cannot happen. That you cannot have sinned. You cannot have changed reality. You cannot have hurt anything real. You haven't done anything in reality, to reality, against reality, or changing reality. Nothing can happen in reality to change it. Reality is a constant state, and that means that it is permanently the same state and can never be changed. Nothing ever changes. It's eternal and it lasts forever, and there's nothing that you can do to make it stop. So in truth, you literally have not separated from God. You have not sinned. You have not attacked. You have not caused, and you haven't done anything. And that is a fact. That is actually a real fact in reality. That's absolutely true. You haven't done shit. But here's the thing, because of the fact that you cannot do anything to reality, you can't change it, and you haven't done so, all of this stuff in the separation from God or sin must be false, must be a lie, must be a fantasy. It's delusional. It's nothing other than a belief that you think you've done something And so it's basically, it's not that you actually have separated or have sinned, it's only that you think you have. You believe in things that aren't true. You believe that you've hurt God. You believe that you have actually sinned, that you committed some terrible crime, and now you should be punished. And it's completely out of touch with reality and what is actually true. And because of that, it's a state of denial. You are simply in denial of the fact that you cannot sin. You're in denial of the fact that you cannot change reality, and you never will, and you never have. You're just so it's like, it's not that you've actually done anything. You haven't done anything real. You haven't sinned, you haven't separated. But in spite of that fact, and in spite of that truth, and in an attempt to deny that it's true, all that's happened is that you've gone into denial, and now you're pretending that you can sin, you have sinned, you did something, there were some consequences, something's been changed, God's been affected, and now he's angry because you hurt him, and now you're now a sinner, and you should be guilty, and then you deserve to be punished and suffer and die because of what you did. But you didn't do anything. You just think you did. You're having a delusional fantasy, a hallucination, a dream, an illusion, where you're imagining that something that is literally impossible has become possible. And Jesus says, it's the world you see that is impossible. How is it that this world is impossible? It's because this whole world, this dream world, is literally not really possible. For this to occur, real sin would have to happen, real attack would have to occur. You would have to be capable of creating reality in a different way that is opposite to God's will, and actually do it in a real way, and actually create a real world where shit happens, and where the impossible happens. And you can't do that, and you never did, and you haven't. This world is impossible. It's the impossible dream. So it's like you couldn't sin against God. It's impossible to sin. There is no sin. But in spite of the fact that it's not possible, you try to insist that it is possible anyway, which is obviously insane. Nobody in their right mind would even think for a second that something that absolutely can never happen, oh look, it's happening, I'm doing it. That's the step into insanity, the tiny mad idea in which you had an idea of something that is literally so impossible that to believe it would be madness. An idea that's so ridiculous that if you were to believe in it, it would be mad. It would be so stupid to believe in it, because it's so obvious and so clear that that idea is just so impossible that you shouldn't even give it a moment's credit, and you should just laugh at it, recognizing how completely false and ridiculous it is. If somebody was to come along and say, it's possible to hurt God, and you're looking at God, and God is there being completely permanent and absolute and totally powerful, and nothing can oppose him, and just saying, oh, I think he's got a flaw, I think he's got a weakness. And God can be affected, and you're like, well, don't be so stupid, that's ridiculous. Because it is ridiculous. But you forgot to laugh. You had this mad idea and you forgot to laugh, i.e. you remembered not to laugh, i.e. you chose to try to invest reality into something that could not ever be real, that could never really occur. You tried to make it happen. You tried to make a world that could never possibly be created. You tried to dream of there being a real separation where you are ejected from heaven, are living in exile and having your own world, and all kinds of things are happening. And you're trying to make it happen. You're trying to bring it about. You're putting in this, you're like in reality where you literally are incapable of sinning, trying your hardest to make something go wrong. You're really giving it a good effort, trying to bring about a consequence that is literally impossible to bring about. And this is why Jesus says, swear not to die, Holy Son of God. You've made a bargain that you cannot keep. You're trying to bargain with this ego idea and say, if I would just do this, maybe I can actually separate from God so much that I can go through death and come out the other side in a different, separate universe where God doesn't exist, and succeed in separating from God fully and living on my own terms and blah blah. And it doesn't work because it's impossible. You cannot get out of God. You cannot leave God. You cannot truly escape into oblivion. But we're trying to. This is what the whole stupid separation is about, is that we're hell-bent on trying to prove that you can do what you cannot do, trying to demonstrate that you can be hurt, trying to make yourself suffer, not your real self. You cannot affect the Son of God. The Son of God cannot be hurt. But you are confusing yourself with illusory images of things that look like they can be hurt, like a body, and then you're attacking the body, trying to prove that you are a body that can be attacked and that can be destroyed, and that somehow this proves and gives the testimony and the final evidence that you literally can do what is impossible, that you actually can kill God's Son, and you can't. The Son of God is free of death. So that's what we're trying to do in bodies, is we're trying to infuse illusions with energy and thought power and belief and conviction to try to make them real. We're trying to turn them into reality, trying to make illusions permanent, trying to give the world a sense of it's really here and I believe in it and it's happening, all to try to increase the denial by believing that you actually can do what is impossible. And supposedly in death, that's the state, that your goal, the ego's goal, is the state of death, which would supposedly demonstrate and prove once and for all that an immortal, permanent, irreversibly permanent being can somehow become corrupted and damaged and sick and suffer and die to try to prove that that you can hurt and kill God's Son and that you can hurt and kill God. And it is utterly ridiculous and impossible because it doesn't work. It has no effect on God. So you're going through all this effort to try to kill yourself, all this effort to try to attack the world, all this effort to try to make sin and guilt and sickness real, for nothing, totally futile, because it has zero effect on anything real. It is purely a fantasy dream, a dream world, a dream of death, a dream of an immortal being dreaming of being mortal, dreaming and having a fantasy about what would it be like if I don't live forever. What would it be like if I suffer? What would it be like if I can be made sick? And what would it be like if I can be afraid all the time? And you're, in truth, an immortal being that cannot change and can never be sick and dead and can never suffer. Putting on a big show, trying to make a big production of this great big performance of trying to pull off and convince yourself and others that you can be something that you're not. The body is the idea of what you think you are. The body is only a dream. The body is nothing. It's not even real. It doesn't even exist outside the dreaming. There are no bodies in reality. God doesn't have a body. You don't have a body. To be without a body is to be in your natural state. You don't need bodies. But you're pretending to be a body so that you can pretend to be attackable and mortal and capable of suffering and not being yourself. The body is the idea of who you think you are, not who you are. It's the idea of trying to be separate from who you are. It's the idea of not being yourself. The body is a denial of your identity. So when you're looking at this body, you're not looking at me. You're getting distracted by a image picture of who I'm not. And you're not seeing me because I'm really sparkly lights and stuff. So it's not that you've actually done anything, it's not that you can do anything, and it's not that anything in the world has any consequence whatsoever. It's a huge dream, lie, state of denial, state of unforgiveness, state of delusion, imagination, dreaming of shit that cannot really happen in reality, and thinking that this is reality and being confused about that and distracted by it and buying into it so much that you think I'm supposed to live this little life and do these activities and go to my job and eat food and shit and all this crap, and all of it is just a big performance trying to justify and give weight to and make seem important things that are completely unreal and unimportant and utterly useless. And the only real use of the body is to teach you of the body's worthlessness, that it has no value, that there's nothing in the world that you want, and it's all just a big dream illusion. So the atonement principle is this idea or state of mind, state of awareness of recognizing these facts, recognizing the truth that sin is impossible, attack is impossible, nothing real can be threatened, nothing real has ever been threatened. You have not caused any changes in reality. Heaven has not in the slightest way changed whatsoever. as a result of the entire separation, none of it has had any effect on anything real ever. Not even a tiny effect. It's and so what the atonement is acknowledging is that you think you've done terrible stuff, you believe in illusory things that aren't real, you imagine that certain things are valuable and important which are not, and you see yourself as something that is not who you are, and recognizing that you've just been in denial the whole time. You've just been pretending that you can do the impossible. You've been dreaming of fantasies of overthrowing reality, having an authority problem, being able to be stronger than God, being capable of hurting him and his son, being able to have these special powers of, I can stop life, or I can attack the living, or I can bring about death, I can choose sickness. All these fantasies that we've been having that are totally impossible and have had no effect whatsoever on reality, on God, on God's Son, on heaven, on creation. Anything real has been totally outside of everything that you've been trying to pull off and do. There is no sin, there is no death, there is no mortality, there is no sickness, there is no suffering, there is no fear, there is no guilt, there is no attack, there are no consequences. Nothing has happened. So it's kind of like this whole entire world is a big lie. This whole world is immortal children of God pretending that they're not who they are, pretending to not be immortal, pretending to suffer, pretending to be sick and dead, and to go through all kinds of hoops and difficulties and sufferings in a big fat dream, and just imagining that the whole thing is really happening and that it's based on you having really done something terrible, which you haven't. So the image that I kind of get quite often is this sense of heaven's compassion and love and gentleness approaching those separated ones who are dreaming of exile and hell, who are nothing other than confused, mistaken, in denial people, who are temporarily insane and don't realize what the truth is, and they're upset because they don't know what the truth is. And heaven's coming along with this gentle, healing love and compassion and understanding and recognition of the truth, that in truth none of what the people think is true is true. And I think there's something in the Course that says something about how the world, there's no truth in the world, and ever since the separation everybody has had absolutely no clue what the truth is. I forget how that goes exactly, but the world has not been certain of anything since then. It's so you've got these kind of this Holy Spirit therapist who is fully aware of the facts and the truth that you are Christ and you are immortal and nothing's ever happened to you, and that your little piece of you is having a dream, this sort of nightmare of fear and fantasy and worries and attacks and so on, murderousness, dreaming of horrible, dark things, having a bad dream, wherein in truth you are this immortal being that's just falling asleep for a while and having a dream and imagining bullshit happening, imagining terrible things happening. And he knows that, and he's compassionate and loving and wants to help you to come to realize and wake up to the perfection that you are, the truth that you are, that you have not done anything, and to become aware of reality again, because if you let go of your denial and your delusion and your belief in the world being real, you become able to see the truth again. You become more aware of love's presence. You become aware of what the truth is, and this is becoming aware of the atonement, aware of the truth, the facts that reality is still the same. Reality hasn't changed. Reality hasn't been affected, hasn't been hurt, is not upset with you, is still loving you. You have a real self in reality that is immortal and innocent still. And becoming able to see that should convince you. It's only because you don't see the scene of the crime, you don't see, to be able to see with your own eyes whether or not God has been affected, whether or not your immortal self has been affected, whether anything real has been threatened. Because you can't see it, you don't have the proof, and so you are confused and deluded and afraid, thinking that some things are true about reality that are not true, thinking that you did sin, and thinking that you have been hurt, and thinking that you can be hurt and attacked. And in truth you haven't. If you could just see and perceive the kingdom of God and see what its condition is, you would have to admit that it looks like nothing even occurred. It looks like I didn't really sin. It looks as though I didn't actually do what I think I did. It looks like I didn't even attack God. It looks like I've never even done anything. It looks like all the things that I ever thought that I did didn't even register. They don't even have a trace. There's not even a single piece of evidence showing that I ever did anything that I thought I did. And nothing real has any sign or demonstration of any proof, any consequence, any effects that I could look at and say, look, there's the evidence for the fact that I did sin. There's the proof. There isn't any. Anywhere in reality, there is none, because you haven't done anything. Absolutely nothing. If you don't mind, I'm going to just, even if you do mind, too bad, I'm going to just have some popcorn and watch how the world is putting on a show. And what a nice performance it is. Look at them go, look at them making their case for why they are sinners and guilty ones, when in fact they cannot be. It is actually popcorn. So what I see is heaven is and the Holy Spirit is, and the angels are being very, very loving towards these individuals, me included, who temporarily are very mistaken in believing things that aren't true, believing that they've done things that they haven't actually done in reality, and trying to offer them healing and therapy and miracles to restore them to an awareness that would show them what the truth really is, so that so in the atonement you can actually see and discern and experience the truth, and therefore recognize that you've never sinned. Nobody's ever sinned. There hasn't been a sin, and the fact that nothing has ever happened. And this is the key. This is the maximum truth. That it's not that you actually did something and now you've got to clean up the mess. It's not that you did a crime and now you've got to pay for it. It's not that you caused something to occur and now you have to repair the damage. It's not at that at all. It is only that you have imagined yourself doing or being capable of doing or having done things that are impossible, that you can never really do and you've never done in reality. So you're just having a dream, a fantasy that you believe in which you believe that you have actually accomplished things that you have never done, and that have not in reality ever occurred. So you might think, oh, I committed this big crime and I affected God and I had power over God and I'm amazing, and God's up there being completely unaffected. You obviously haven't done anything, but you're still believing that you are. You're like taking credit for something that you've never done. And so in reality, in truth, the separation and everything in it literally has not happened in reality. It's not just though it has happened and we have to undo it, it's that it actually, the occurrence of it is not real. It didn't happen to reality. You didn't hurt reality. You haven't changed reality. You haven't sinned against reality. You're just in reality having a little dream, having a nightmare of imagining that you're doing stuff to reality when you're not. So it's not actually happening in or to anything real. It's only happening in a fantasy to a fantasy. So all the events that occur in the world, every single thing that you do, everything that happens isn't happening anywhere in reality. It is not real. It is just a dream where you're imagining world events, people, bodies, things happening, you doing stuff in time and space, which is only inside the context of a fantasy dream world that doesn't exist in reality and has zero consequences against reality. It has absolutely no causal power, doesn't do anything. There are no causes in the world. This is why you have to learn that you're not a victim of the world, because literally the world is not a cause. It doesn't do anything. And by you making it, you haven't done anything. You haven't caused God's kingdom to be upset. You haven't caused the end of life. And so that means the whole history of humankind The whole history of the planet, the whole history of the universe has not happened in reality. So anything that you've ever done in your life, any events, anything that you caused, anything that you did, where you hurt someone, you broke something, you stole something, you committed some crime, you were a murderer, you attacked someone, you argued with somebody, whatever it is, which you held on to and believed in, and is like a belief that you'd have sinned. You didn't do any of those things in reality. You only did them in a dream. You only did them inside a little hallucinated dream bubble where nothing real's happening. Which means that you did not really do any of the things that you ever think you've ever done. Even if you have memories of having done these things in a dream, even if you can recall the horrible things that you did, even if you were so horrendous that you caused death, doesn't matter what it is that you think you did, it did not happen in reality. It didn't happen outside of your fantasy of being able to do impossible things. It didn't happen to anything real. Whatever the consequences were, whatever the effects were, if anything could be affected, it's proof that that thing must not be real. If you caused damage and changed something, you broke a window, or you hurt a body, or you damaged a wall, or whatever it is, pissed on the flowers, if it changed, it cannot be real. Nothing real can be threatened, and reality is a constant state, and therefore there is no change in reality. Nothing can change anything real. Whatever you did that caused an effect and made something happen, and you changed something, cannot have been happening to anything real or in reality. It can only have been you dreaming of doing stuff that isn't really possible, that has no consequences in reality, has not hurt anyone real, hasn't done anything to any real person. So you have to realize that this is forgiveness. This is the extreme extent that you have to take your awareness and your forgiveness, because if you're still believing, back in 1982 I did this terrible thing, and this and this and this happened, and all these things came from it, and blah blah blah, there's a big cascade of freaking clusterfuck or whatever, and just the mere fact that you believe it happened is a belief in sin. Just the belief that you have a memory of it and it seemed like something occurred is a belief in sin. It's a belief that something actually happened. Something went wrong. I caused something to change that I think is real. I made something different. That's all believing in illusions. That's all believing in the separation. It's all believing that you sinned. So it's not merely a matter of, well, I did this thing and now I have to sort of become at peace with it, or I'm going to keep the fact that it was done, and now I'm going to try to let myself off the hook somehow, but still believe that I did it. If you believe that you did it at all, you will not be able to let go of what happened. You will not be able to fully forgive yourself. You have to come to realize, because the atonement is a cure, you have to come to realize that you literally didn't do what you think you did. Even in time and space, you did not do the activities and events that you think occurred. You haven't done anything, ever. You're still, in truth, sitting in heaven with God, enjoying a cup of tea, doing nothing else other than the only function of spirit is to, oh wait, your only function is to extend God's spirit. That's all that you're doing, and you never stop. And so this other stuff and this idea that you're doing these other things and being a hooligan in the world, you're not. You're not doing anything that has any real consequence anywhere real. This is just a dream. And you'll find that if you don't get to that point with forgiving yourself, of realizing that that terrible thing that you think you did, no matter what it was, it only took place in a dream. It only happened in your dreaming fantasy of doing things that are impossible, your fantasy life of being outside the kingdom. Your, of course, says the world of bodies is the world of sin, for only if there is a body is sin possible. And so if you think, okay, I had a body and I used my body to attack and I made something happen and I sinned, you're, to the ego, you're basically sinning by breathing. If I rub my nose, that is a sin. If I wiggle my eyebrows, that is me sinning all over the place. I'm just sinning left, right, and center. Just a big pile of sin. Because to the ego, anything in space-time is sin. This is a world of sin. The world is made of sin. This wall sitting here doing nothing is sinning against God. That wall was made as an attack on God. It's designed to block and attack reality. It's doing it passively, even if it's not moving. If you believe that wall exists, you believe in sin. If you think that you have ever done anything, you think you're sinful, because this entire realm is a realm of believing that, okay, I've gone into this place where I'm actually doing the things that I can't really do. I'm actually pulling off the attacks that are not possible on reality. I'm actually finding a way to make a loophole or a workaround or an exception where it looks as if I actually can do the sins that I obviously cannot do in reality. And so you've created these scenarios with bodies and objects and things to try to make the illusory appearance that you're actually able to do the things that are not possible in reality. That I could go over there to that car and puncture the tires, and this is a sin. Or I can walk across the snow and leave footprints in the snow, that's a sin. I can walk across the way there and breathe in the air, and that's also a sin. Because I'm believing that I'm doing things at all. Just the general idea that you're even doing something is the idea of sin, because in reality nothing ever changes. It's a permanent state. There's no interruptions, there's no changes, there's no footprints in the snow, there's no attacks, there's nothing to attack, there's no bodies, there's no events happening in time and space. So if you think you did something, anything, and you believe that it happened, and you haven't yet realized that it didn't happen in reality, it only happened in a dream, and therefore nothing real was ever affected by it, and only dream stuff ever seemed to be affected by it, and because it is a dream, not reality, it's not true. Because it didn't take place in reality, it didn't take place at all. It didn't really happen. You imagined it. So whatever you did, no matter how physical and solid and real it seems, no matter what it is, that is you dreaming. You're dreaming of doing sins in a sinful world that are not occurring in reality. This is not taking place to reality. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing has been affected. If you go and you attack somebody and you take your caveman club and you whack them across the head and they die, and you become filled with instant remorse and guilt because you believe that you did it, just the mere fact that you even did it at all is a belief in sin, and you automatically would then become guilty. Just that idea, just even the notion that you did something is enough of a belief for you to believe that sin is real. So whatever you've done, you've got to now tell yourself, you didn't do it. In God's eyes, you are 100% innocent. In reality, in truth, nothing has come from it. It's had zero consequences. God has not been affected. Your brother, who is a mortal spirit, cannot be hurt by you. You, who are a mortal spirit, cannot be hurt by your brother. Believing that your brother is doing something to you is your delusion. Your brother believing that you're doing something to him is his delusion. There is no horizontal causality between brothers because you're both freaking immortal spirits that cannot be hurt, that cannot be affected. Your reality and your brother's reality in heaven is that you are permanent. So nothing can ever really happen to who you really are. So all of the beliefs that you have, oh, I'm having an argument with this person and they did this to me and I did that to them, and all this guilt-inducing shit, it's all bullshit that you're making up. It's all lies. It's all delusions and misperceptions and being mistaken, and it's unforgiveness. Many years ago there was a thing that I did that seemed really terrible, and on the physical level it seemingly was terrible, where I was playing with some friends and we were being foolish, and it resulted in my friend's eye being injured and him eventually having to have it removed because it was damaged. And you can be sure that there was a huge weight of guilt that came from that. And regardless of whether I deserved to be punished or not, and nobody ever deserves to be punished, all that you are is mistaken. You don't deserve to be punished for making mistakes. You only deserve correction and healing and love when you make mistakes. That is a forgiving attitude. But because of that happening, I chose and gave to myself a huge mountain load of guilt and shame and fear of punishment and delusions and all kinds of shit. and then started gradually over time trying to heal that, and took a very long time and almost fully healed it by reframing it and trying to justify and explaining how I was young at the time and I didn't know any better, and all those kind of things that you use to try to persuade yourself that even though you did it, you're innocent, and that doesn't go all the way, because you still are believing something happened, it affected something real, therefore I'm a sinner. And that's the core. It's like this core little nugget of belief that just will not go away if you still believe that it even happened. If you think you did it, and if you think that you did it in reality, if you think this is real, you will not be able to let it go. And I could not let it go, even though I did tons and tons of healing over years and decades, and felt generally better about it. I could still be triggered, and I could still be affected, and somebody could still point it out, and I still would feel a twinge of upset and guilt and shame and so on. It was not until this was the first time that I ever really approached this extreme truth of the atonement, that I finally let myself see that whatever happened, it only happened in a dream world. It didn't happen in reality. Therefore, that person's real self was absolutely zero affected. Therefore, I did not do anything to their real self. Their imagined self was the only thing that seemed to be hurt. And that imagined self is in my dream. It is not real. So I only had hurt an imaginary, fake body self, an illusory self, and therefore hadn't really done anything. In reality, had not really threatened anything real. Nothing real had been threatened. The relief from that, when you finally can let yourself acknowledge the real context of all the stuff that's happening, there's an even bigger picture beyond stuff happens in the world, because the world itself is a dream illusion, and there's a bigger context that nothing in this dream is real. Nothing in this dream is happening. Nothing in this dream is possible in reality. It's a dream of the impossible. And upon finally allowing myself to accept that is true, and having no objections to it, I let myself accept the atonement on that issue. And that meant becoming aware that I must still be innocent. God must still love me, because obviously I haven't actually done anything. And there's no grounds for feeling guilty anymore, because I didn't actually sin. My sin was not a sin. My sin was not a real sin. It was an imagined sin. It was a made-up crime. It was a bad dream, fictional, invented sin in a dream, happening to dream figures with no consequences. In reality, zero consequences. So I have to accept that. That's true. I have not done anything to reality. And it's that truth where you can accept and see and receive This is the good part. This is you in acknowledging that you can now let yourself receive love from God. Because if you're willing to admit that you are sinless and innocent in God's eyes, which you are in truth, then you will let yourself be lovable. You'll let yourself be loved, and you'll allow yourself to acknowledge and accept that God loves you fully, unconditionally, permanently, always has. And there's a huge relief in realizing that God always did love you. God always was loving you the whole damn time. And all the time that you were suffering and thinking that you did terrible things and that you're this guilty motherfucker and trying to hurt yourself and trying to punish yourself and kill yourself, God was loving you the whole damn time because he didn't believe you had done anything. He never bought into your delusion that you could sin or that you had. So then you'll realize that in God's eyes, you've been innocent all along. You have never done anything. According to him, you have never ever sinned. And he's like laughing at you. Oops. He's like laughing at you believing that you had ever even been capable of doing these insane things that you cannot really do in reality. And it is a huge relief. It's a weight off your shoulders to realize God still loves you. Even after that whole long, drawn-out suffering, the whole thing is bullshit, and God still loves you. And has not held anything against you, has not been hurt by what you did, is not upset with you, is not angry at you, is not trying to get revenge, is not trying to hurt you or punish you in any way. That is the atonement. That's you accepting the truth that you've never, ever, ever done anything real. And God has always been the same, and God loves you now, and God always loved you, and always has, and always will. That's all he can do. And therefore, you have this huge relief that, oh, it's actually true and real that I am still innocent. I am as God created me. I haven't changed from how I was as God created me, and therefore I'm still the same. And apparently I didn't. It's like the whole past of all the things you think you did haven't happened, and you realize that you're still the way you were way back in ancient history before you even started to dream. You never really changed out of that state of perfection. You just thought you did. You just went to sleep for a while and imagined a world, imagined a hell, imagined yourself sinning and suffering as a result, and none of it happened. And you're still absolutely holy and perfect as God created you, and you've always been, and your real self. And now you can re-accept and receive and be one with your real self and acknowledge your divine innocence, which is permanent, because you are not a sinner and you can never be a sinner. Nothing that you ever thought you did, you did. You never have even so much as begun to do anything in reality. This whole world is a big, just a giant story, just a big dream and a big imagined, a giant imagined sin, which has no consequences. When the mind wakes up to reality, it simply carries on where it left off, knowing that it still is in the same condition that it always was in. It's still holy, it's still innocent, it's still whole, it's healed, it's perfect, it's sinless, it's guiltless, it's free from fear, free from suffering, free from death, and is just resuming being as God permanently enforces that it be. You cannot change your true nature. You cannot change God's mind about you. You cannot undo your soul. You cannot get rid of yourself. You cannot make yourself dead. Death is an illusion. It doesn't work. Even when you try to make it happen in the body, you're just going to carry on afterwards, and you're going to be like, well, that didn't work, did it? Now I'm going to have to go and do another lifetime. Fucking hell. I didn't quite get it, did I? I didn't quite learn the simple truth that there is no world, and I have never sinned, and there is no sin anywhere. When Jesus accepted that there's no sin anywhere, he accepted it for everyone and abolished sin. It says so in the Course. Jesus abolished all sin when he accepted the atonement, because he accepted it for the whole sonship, and now it applies to everyone. The recognition that there is no sin and no one has ever sinned. It's not that you did sin and then he got rid of the sins. It's that he realized there was no sin to begin with. Jesus atoning for sin doesn't mean I've done a really bad thing. Jesus is going to pay for it for me. I'm a great big evil sinner. Jesus is going to come along and wipe it away, and he's going to suffer for me. Yes, that's bullshit. That is not what atonement means. Atonement is the recognition that there is no sin. No one has ever sinned. Nobody needs to pay for it. There isn't any punishment or suffering required. Punishment is an ego bullshit thing based on the belief that you really did sin, there really was a sin, it really happened, and now you're guilty, and therefore you must be punished. There is no punishment in forgiveness. Forgiveness is the recognition that you didn't sin, and therefore you're still innocent. That is forgiveness. You don't deserve to be guilty and punished. You deserve to be loved and forgiven. That is the truth. So as it says, enlightenment is but a recognition, not a change at all. It's a recognition of the facts, a recognition of the fact that there's no real sin anywhere. Nothing has ever really happened. We just had a strange dream, a delusional state of mind where we imagined ourselves to be evil monsters, and we never really were. And then you wake up from it and remember that you're perfectly pure, innocent, divine, holy, perfect beings forever, and you never had really done shit. There's no shit. And that also means there's no death, because the dream of death is the dream of the ridiculous bullshit idea that that which is immortal and eternal and permanent can somehow be affected and suffer and be damaged and become sick and corrupted and then eventually die. And it's a fantasy. It is not possible. Death is not possible. Death is not possible. It's not real. This is why Jesus was able to raise the dead, because he knew the people who seemed dead were faking it. And they basically were not having a real death. They were having the illusion of a death. And he knew it. And he was able to have power over that illusion from his perspective, and was able to say, get the fuck up and walk, you asshole. Stop pretending to be dead and they obeyed, and up they get, and as if nothing even happened. Because it hadn't. And miracle working is entirely based on this atonement level reality. Because in the atonement, you know, you see, you believe and experience that there's no reality to anything here. There's no real sins. There's no real sickness. There's no real death. There's no real suffering of any kind. It's all a big pretense. It's all people trying to convince each other and themselves that something's true that is not. Something's possible that is not. Something's real that is not. It's a world of lies. It's a world of lies, and there's no truth in the world. So there is no real death, because death is the idea of the impossible. To believe that God's Son can die and God's Son is immortal, to believe that God can be affected and hurt, is absolutely ridiculous. To believe that you, as a son of God, can suffer, can be afraid, can be sick, can be guilty and ashamed, can be sinful, is all a lie. And it's not that your real self ever becomes those things. It's that you go into denial and pretend that you're becoming those things by trying to make your body be used as a way to prove it. And so people are using their bodies to try to prove that they can be attacked, that they're not immortal. You're using the body for attack. The body becomes sick, and the body now becomes an image that is teaching yourself and others that both of you are attackable. And here's the proof. Look at my lovely sickness. Look at my shit. I'm going to hold up a picture of crucifixion and make it look as though the Son of God has been hurt and defiled and corrupted, and something's damaged the body, in order to try to prove that the Son of God has been damaged along with the body. And so that sick bodies are accusers. Sickness teaches yourself and others that both of you are not immortal. Sickness is an attempt to prove you can be hurt. That's a close quote. Sickness is an attempt to prove that you can be hurt. So the opposite of that is using the body only to communicate truth. And it says elsewhere that the only communication the Holy Spirit does is healing. So communication to him means healing, using the body for healing. And the body becomes a sign of life to those grown sick of the fetid stench of death, and a symbol of immortality. And it becomes free from sickness, free from suffering, free from attack and damage, in order to use it as a symbol in a dream to show, hey, I, as an immortal Son of God, cannot be hurt. I, as an immortal Son of God, am not choosing to make myself sick, and I'm not trying to prove that we both are hurtable. And you use the body with the Holy Spirit. That means that the body has to be healed. And it states in the Course, forgiveness is not real unless it brings healing to both you and your brother. And that means on the physical level, as well as emotional and mental, all of the signs and symptoms of attack have to be undone, cancelled, removed, and healed with miracles, so that you can prove and demonstrate and use the body to teach immortality in the dream to those who are choosing to try to prove otherwise. And this leads to the resurrection in which the body has been fully healed, has symbolized immortality, cannot be hurt against your will, and the only way then for it to go away is for you to disappear it. Because if you try to kill it, that is attack, that's bullshit. If you try to put it down and let it die and rot, that is also bullshit. That is you attempting to still demonstrate that you can be attacked. The only clean way to exit the dream of death is not left by death. The only clean way to exit is by making the body simply vanish so that it ceases to show up and ceases to be able to demonstrate death. Because in the Atonement truth, there literally is no death. Nothing has ever died. And that sounds radical because it is. Nothing that has ever seemed to die has ever been real. There's a tree over there with no leaves on it because all the leaves have died. None of those leaves are real because nothing real can be threatened, and death is a threat. So if that stuff is dead, it is not reality. Nothing real has ever died. You have never really died. Even if you had a lifetime where you were trampled by horses, or you were shitted upon by a buffalo, or whatever it was that brought about your demise, you, as reality, didn't get affected whatsoever. Only the body seemed, in a dream, to go through a death process, and it had no effect on the Son of God. Death is an illusion. It does not accomplish what it claims to accomplish. It does not kill. Death does not end life. Death is not the end of life. Death is a denial of the fact that you have eternal life already, and your reality of your real self can never be changed. Death is denial. It's an attempt to be so heavily in denial about who and what you are that you're willing to try to demonstrate that you can be heavily attacked and destroyed in order to try to prove that God's Son has been killed. And even if you're insane enough to do that, nobody in their right mind would ever do that. You cannot die unless you choose to do so, and no one dies without their own consent. You're not supposed to be dying. Swear not to die. Even if you do it, you, as immortal spirit, are unaffected. You do not die. Only the body illusion seems to get to the state that we call death. And the Son of God is unscathed at all times. The Son of God has never been sick. The Son of God has never died. The Son of God cannot die. He is immortal. There is no real death. All death is illusions of death in a dream of death, pretending that death's possible when in fact nothing real can ever die. So there is no real death. There is no real death. There is no real death. Only dreamed, pretend death. And so you, as a mortal spirit, can never die, never will die. So all of the ways that you try to prove otherwise, all the ways that you try to murder yourself, attack the body, all the ways that you choose to be sick, all the ways that you claim suffering and that someone did something to you, is all you losing touch with the facts of reality that you are immortal. So if you knew that you are fully immortal and permanent and nothing can ever change that ever, you have no power to change God's will. God has permanently created you for an eternity. If you could just be aware of that and accept that, you wouldn't even begin to consider making yourself suffer. You wouldn't even start conceiving of, I wonder how I'm going to die this time. You wouldn't even start thinking about other people are doing stuff to me, I'm being affected, I'm a victim. The entire victimhood thing is bullshit, trying to cover up your immortality. And every time that you affirm it and believe in it, you're trying to believe that you're not immortal, that you can be affected and you've been affected, and that you are at the effect of the world. Nothing can affect the Son of God. And even when you believe that it has happened, and you believe that you've been affected, and you think the world's doing something to you, and it's frightening you, and it's attacking you and threatening you, you must be mistaken. Because in truth, you cannot be affected, you cannot be attacked. So if you're thinking that you can, you need some correction because you're in denial. Fortunately, you're in denial of the fact that you can't be hurt. It's not that you're denying that you are actually vulnerable. It's not that you're denying that you can actually be killed. It's that you're denying that you cannot be killed. You're denying that you have immortality already, permanently. And that's what we're all doing. We're all like in a state of confusion and being mistaken and in denial and thinking that we're bodies and thinking that we're mortal, thinking that things can happen to us and that they have, and that we've made things happen to others, and none of it's true. And the atonement is what shows you that that is the fact of the matter, that there is no way anything can ever die that's real. There's no way that you can ever stop existing. You are a permanent thought of God, eternal, absolute permanence, and you can never change that. There's nothing you can do to change God's mind. And I think there's even a part in the Course talking about that. And so you're kind of insane to believe otherwise. You're mistaken when you believe otherwise. If you were in your right mind and sane and came to your senses and accepted and admitted the truth, and if you could recognize what the truth really is, your immortality, and never fall for the temptation to believe in stuff's happening to me and I'm vulnerable and I can be threatened and this person did this to me and so on, and I'm the body and so on. If you would never be tempted by that and never believe it, you could keep a clear awareness of the truth about you, that you are still as God created you and you always will be, then you're awake and you're in the atonement, and now you're accepting the truth of the atonement, the principle that nothing has happened in reality, and you've just been dreaming. The entire dream is completely no consequences whatsoever. Absolutely no consequences in reality. You wake up to realizing that all the shit that you thought was happening, all the things you ever thought you did, doesn't matter. It was all bullshit. It was all fantasy, all a dream, all you just imagining and making up stuff. None of it's true. None of it's true. Zero. Absolute false bullshit lies the whole time. Nobody ever died, nobody was ever really sick, nobody ever really suffered. They just believed that they were until they came to their senses and realized that they're real. I am not an illusion, but a reality. I am not afraid, but all-powerful. I am not, I cannot see in darkness, but in light. All those things are like trying to get you to own the fact that you are powerful and immortal and nothing can happen to you. I am not mortal, but immortal. I cannot die, but live forever. I cannot be sick, but have permanent health. I cannot be affected. I am pure causality. This is a course in cause, not effect. So this is what the atonement is about. It's nothing to do with you having ever done anything. It's entirely to do with realizing that you haven't, because you've just been dreaming. You've just been having a bad dream, fantasizing about impossible stuff, thinking that it's happening to reality, and it's not. And reality, the whole time, reality's been just the same. Heaven is just having its happiness and its songs and its celebration and joy and permanence, and creation's extension is uninterrupted, and all the while you're having this weird dream. And when you wake up to it, you'll just remember to laugh. Remember to laugh at realizing how impossible what you were trying to do was, realizing how ridiculous it was, how completely nonsense, how utterly untrue and impossible. And then the fact that it's had no consequences and nothing's ever changed, and you're still the way that you always were in heaven, and just laughing your head off at how funny that is, and how hilarious it is that you ever could have thought otherwise. How obvious the truth is. So there you go. That's kind of what the atonement's about. It's just about a recognition of the truth. It's just about waking up to accepting who you really are, and not what you're pretending to be. I'm going to stop there. Thanks for listening if you made it this far, and talk to you soon. Atonement. Bye-bye.